Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Tara Spalding. It is my pleasure to be hosting you as well as our special guest today, Bao Tran, on this OpenUp webinar. Welcome to another Boom Startup online program where we are promoting education around what it takes to create and sustain a profitable business. Today's topic is something that's extremely important, especially if you're leveraging technology or unique designs in your company, and that is about applying for a patent. This is something that every founder should know, even if they are on the path for patents or not at this time. And so it's important to us to encourage understanding and education around this space. Just like all other Boom Startup programs, we would like these webinars to be open and inclusive as possible. Feel free to turn on your camera. In fact, we also encourage questions. So throughout the presentation, please enter your questions in the chat. Myself or Christina Neild will be asking Bao the questions at the appropriate times, like when there's a breathing moment. So with no further ado, I would like to go ahead and introduce Boom Startup. For those of you who are new, welcome. Love to give thank you to our sponsors to the Boom Startup program. Without these sponsors, we would be not able to bring these very smart programs to the Boom Startup community. So thank you to Assure, Stoll Reeves, now CFO, and Outcode. If you're new to Boom Startup, welcome. We are an open and opt-in accelerator, very unlike any other accelerator, because we are working to encourage founders who are the do-it-yourselfers that are willing to commit with grit. Our platform will track your business development and make suggestions on educational as well as mentor and tools that can help the growth of your business. And when the timing is right and we have interested investment opportunities, we'll invite you into our investor community and get you prepared for funding. We are a global accelerator. We see participants from all around the world, and we welcome open conversations and participation. And also because of our focus on financial and funding themes, we do work with companies that span several different industries and sectors and different business models. How we measure success is not if you can close funding or not, but if you can find your own capital. The number one source of capital, of course, is sales and profitability. So the lion's share of our communications are things like what we're focusing on today, like patents and how you can leverage them for profitability. Also, we like to help you figure out how to optimize your financials and like reduce spends, as well as improve your go-to-market execution. So always look for these sorts of programs and jump in because they are open and opt-in. We also are very helpful on setting you up for funding paths. The more you participate in our programs and the more you communicate data on your business growth, guess what? We can vouch for your business when it comes to your investment rounds. And so it's a wonderful opportunity to stay in touch with us and to tell us what's going on with your business. Of course, as mentioned, we do have the opportunity to fund up to $100,000 in a pre-seed round. Additionally, we deliver success through funding-oriented programs, and we also track your business's startup growth through our platform, as well as programs like this and our mentoring. We also are a very helpful resource for pre-seed investment patterns. So if you're curious what other companies are raising in pre-seed rounds that are similar to your business, either by the model, like revenue stream or by industry, just ask us. We'd love to provide this sort of information to you. And additionally, Boom Startup Accelerator is unique to offer flexible and open investment rounds, because not only are we investing in it, but it's open for your investor communities to do so as well, thanks to Assure's SPVs. And Assure is our parent company, and they are the leading SPV provider and financial services. Boom Startup has 4 main programs. This is an OpenUp workshop. You're going to get to know it. And again, we encourage participation in this, as well as our other programs. We host Pitch Up, which is a pitch competition. It's a global competition. We do that twice a year, and it's so much fun. It gives you great exposure. We also have Rise Up Sprints, which are 1 week long immersive online workshops where an expert leads you through a business problem and gets you to figure out your own solution and an action plan to resolve it. And of course, Amplify Up is our funding program. And this is where we help you prepare for funding, figure out your financial ask and allocations, and get you along and to close that funding through those SPVs. Now, with no further ado, I'd like to introduce our mentor today. It's Bao Tran. Bao is the principal at Patent Professional Corporation. I strongly encourage you to connect with Bao on LinkedIn, and he is our patent expert. Not only is he at Patent PC, but he was previously at Kleiner Perkins, which is one of the leading global law firms, especially for the tech sector. And Bao has some really interesting stories to talk about these companies, helping them with their patents, as well as other companies as well. And I don't want to take all of the excitement out of Bao's presentation, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over in a quick second to Bao. But I do also want to encourage you that if you have questions that don't get answered during the session, reach out to Bao. He's a wonderful person. You can meet him on LinkedIn, or even better, schedule a one-on-one session through the Boom Startup community. He's a wonderful mentor. Let's use him and ask him all the questions. So Bao, I'm going to go ahead, and you should be able to share your screen. And with no further ado, please tell everyone about the importance of patents. And again, I encourage everyone to ask their questions through the chat window.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much, Tara, and hello from Silicon Valley. I've been working with a lot of startups, and I've heard great things about Boom Startup, and I love the work that Tara and the team there has done. So yeah, my background is I originally started out with a big firm, law firm, patent firm. And then this was in the height of, I think around 99, the dot-com boom years. And I got the bug to, well, let's check out a startup and see how they did. And so one of my own client was a startup called Align Technology. And they got funded $5 million Series A, and they wanted me to come in and kind of build them a great portfolio. So I kind of, this is the dot-com boom. So I said, well, what the heck, we'll jump. We'll jump from the comfort of the big law firms to a startup. And I think I got very lucky there. I got through, I was able to see a company from, the small phase going through, Series C, and then eventually going public. And then, of course, when we went public, the dot-com companies were doing, were just booming. And back then, dental technology such as the Invisalign technology was not as popular as the dot-com. But then very soon after that, then the market turned, and then you had a big kind of a dot-com crash. And amazingly, then the dental technology also, all of a sudden became popular. And so I was able to see the entire spectrum of that, and that was very exciting to see. And I felt like I had a role to contribute to, to how to deploy the patent as a business tool to help the company expand it to where it is now. So anyway, that's how my startup journey got started. I got bitten by that, and I've been helping startups, and so I'm very excited to be here to share what I know and to help you, all the founders succeed. So with that in mind, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, yes, we can.
You're able to see it, right? Okay, well, great. So let me just do a little intro about the, let me see, is it changing? Yep, there it is. Okay. So our law firm is a bit unique from the other law firms in that we have deep background with big companies, but we really wanted to help startups. And because of that, we've been developing technologies that originally we developed for our own internal use. And we're now beginning to shift that technology out so that making it available to entrepreneurs to create patents easily. And Tara talked about the do-it-yourselfer approach, and I guess the hardest step is the first step, right? So our original tools were originally done for lawyers, but then a year ago, we started experimenting with artificial intelligence and the ability to generate deep documents. And so I'm very excited to announce that we are now gonna make this tool available. And on top of that, we as our law firm will stand behind that to then help you massage that, because we understand that, we're giving you a very sophisticated tool, and perhaps, it's best to provide a layer of service. So later on, I will explain to you how the system works with reference to this hamburger example. So anyway, the short of it is that our firm is not just patent savvy, but we're also tech savvy. And because we've done work in the tech space for 20 years now. So we've seen every single technology that's come to pass. So that's a little bit about us. So what is a patent about? I saw an article that's extremely, it struck me. It was back in 2016 by Quartz magazine. And there they documented the story of an entrepreneur he was in Israel. And he did this Kickstarter project, and he was shocked that, while the Kickstarter was still ongoing, he got cloned, and the people who cloned him did it at half the price. And so his backers were talking to him saying, hey, why are we paying you this full price when that was done? I can buy it off the shelf ahead of you. So that's the problem that we as entrepreneurs face, is that the technology spreads really quickly. And if you simply just go on Kickstarter and open your chest out, there is a likely, if you don't succeed, nobody cares. But if you got funded, that means you got traction, and that's where the issues arise. So the purpose of a patent is to prevent others from making, using, offering, or selling the invention. And patents are national. So of course, you have US patent, you got Chinese patent, you got European patents. But and in the US, you got 20 years from the date of filing. And here is what can be patented. I've used an old example. On the Coke can that you have, Coke licensed that patent from the inventor who did the very first tab. And so that illustrates that the patents can cover a process, a machine, a way of manufacturing, a composition of matter. So for example, maybe maybe the way you made your sandwich, and then an improvement on any of that. So that's called utility patent. It covers the function. And utilities are very broad because it covers the target product. Now, contrast that to a design patent. So we all have seen the Coke bottle with that curvy shape. The bottle itself is not novel, but the shape of that is. And so that is protected under a design patent. So at a very top level view, you can see that the two major types of patents, the utility and the design. There's also a plant patent, but except for AgTech or maybe some people in the cannabis space, very few people are interested in plant patents, and so I won't discuss that. So what kind of information do we need in a patent? first we need a description. And what is a description? It details how the invention works. The patent office really is focused on technology as opposed to marketing speak. Yesterday, I spoke with an entrepreneur who took the slide deck presentation, and then he added a little bit more of the technical description, but very few. And then he tried to patent that as a provisional. And I told him, well, you know, at that broad level, you're going to run into a lot of objections. So in a patent, you really want to talk a lot about how you did it. So the background of it is, you know, is the issues that you're solving, right? The issue you're facing. So for example, if you were creating, I don't know, maybe a social network, the problem might be that, you know, the existing communications use emails, and it's a point-to-point, and if you want to have a group sharing information, you couldn't do it. So that's the background. Then you talk about, so that's a problem to be solved. And then you talk about your solution. And so you've already done this in your slide deck, right? You've already, you know, most slide deck typically has a problem slide and a solution slide. So very easy. Then the next part that's hard for people is then how do you talk about your detailed description? How do you go in depth about it so that you're being defensive in anticipation of a rejection from the patent office? The drawings are optional, but most likely you're going to need it. So we recommend lots of drawing if you can, because a drawing is worth 1,000 words. So use that, you know, if you can, just document your invention in lots of drawing. That's the cheapest way to document your idea. Then we have, you know, the abstract, which is very easy. It's basically a paragraph. And then the claims. The claims is probably the most difficult part because that's where the litigation centers around. And that's where lawyers are really, I think, if you have to get lawyer help, that's the area. So once you file it, then it's patent pending. And the patent pending could arise if you file a provisional or utility. And we'll go into why a provisional is going to be a very good approach for you. But typically, well, you're going to see this complicated, you know, path. And I don't think you need to worry so much about it. But typically, when you come into it, you're going to get initial review. The examiner is going to try to give you a pushback. We see that at about 95% because, you know, people think of this like you're buying a house, right? If you are offering, let's say $1 million for a house, and that offer is immediately accepted in 5 minutes, you'll be thinking in the back of your mind, I overpaid, right? So the dynamic is very similar. You are going to present a claim set that defines the boundary of what you block people from doing. And if you present it so narrowly that the examiner says, oh yeah, this is you know, easy, I'm going to allow it, you're going to start thinking, uh-oh, I kind of didn't negotiate properly. But so one path is allowance, but that occurs about 5% of the time. The most common path is you're going to get rejected. And so think of this as a process. And in a rejection, the examiner is going to use 2 or 3 references and saying, oh, it's obvious what you're doing. And typically your response is, hey, wait a minute. You know, you are using hindsight because I told you in my application to do 1 and 2, and here you are, you're just going out to the patent database and search for things that could do 1 and another one that can do 2, and then you say it's obvious, but that's hindsight. That's number 1. Number 2, when you combine it like that, it's like combining a bicycle and a car. Sure, they're both, you know, vehicles, but that's, it's crazy. It's not going to work. And then the third thing you're going to say is, well, if you think it's that easy, how come I don't see that on the marketplace? So those, you know, we typically push back to the examiner, and it's a loop where the examiner will try to say your invention is obvious. You then go back and you say, well, it's not. And when you have a deep disclosure, the approach that we prefer, then you can always pull out and you say, oh yeah, well, at the top level, they're vehicles and they have wheels, but they don't have this hybrid engine, for example. And then you can bring them in, and that way it's a very, you have a lot of path toward allowance, and that's what you want to go to. And then of course, you really don't want to go into the section where you got to appeal because your cost is going to mount up. And but that certainly is a path if you've got an examiner who's completely unreasonable. And so the typical path is you apply, they're gonna typically push back on you and you renegotiate. And so that's basically what happens during examination at the patent office. And so we're going to talk quickly about provisional, which is, you've heard a lot about it. And provisional is very low cost because there's anything, you can put anything into a provisional, and it's a placeholder. Think of it like you're buying an option that a year from now you're going to convert that into a utility application which will get examined. So it's very low cost. But the caveat is, if you're not careful, or in computer, when I was in computer programming, we have a term called garbage in, garbage out. So if you do a one-page disclosure, then that's very low level of disclosure. And so a year from now, when you write an application where it's going to have to turn into 20 or 30 pages, people are naturally going to say, well, wait a minute, where did the other 29 pages go? So we prefer that you write a provisional in the same depth as you write a utility, i.e. use the same style and provide tons of information. And the advantage of that is you get an extra year of life. Why? When you file your provisional, you got 1 year to convert it to utility, right? The utility has 20 years from the filing of that utility. So now your life is actually 21 years if you use a combo approach. And drug companies do it that way because the last years of Viagra is worth a few $1 billion. So they do it that way. A lot of people, sometimes they use provisional, sometimes they just jump straight into a utility. It depends on their personal circumstances. And so so it's inexpensive, but you should pay attention to it. Number two is that the provisional, it starts a patent pending status, right? So that's great for you in terms of doing your product brochures and marketing. You can go and talk to investors and you feel like you're at least got a belt on. You may still need an NDA for a suspender, but but a patent certainly is going to be a good protection for you. Now, because of that patent pending, it also triggers a 1 year international filing. And we can cross that bridge when you get there. But think about that. You have to 1 year, you have to convert to US as well as international if you want international. So international, again, is the continuation of this. You got to file within 1 year. And one way you can use to delay the need to go into each individual country is through a mechanism called a patent cooperation treaty. And so when you go through there, it will delay that conversion out another 18 months from the earliest filing date. And so most of the important countries of the world are covered. Maybe Brazil's the only one that's the exception, but if you do ag business, that might be important for agricultural exports. And I think that's pretty much about it. So that
was great.
Brief
yeah, thank you, Val. We have some questions that are coming in. So let's just get the conversation going.
So that we can see everybody. Yeah, no, that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the first question is, what's the best way to protect a new idea if I can't afford to pay for a patent until someone gets customers, basically gets sales? So what's the best way to protect these ideas?
So the best way, as I've said, is a provisional application, and you certainly can do it yourself. The provisional is essentially a you can do a brain dump. So if you've already, let's say, have internal documentation of what you do, you can just take that document and then put in a cover sheet and file that, and that's a placeholder. So if you have no time, let's say tomorrow you're going to be making a sales, and you have no other choice you don't have time to organize the information, then take the best bit of information and put it into the provisional. You may want to remove certain things that you don't want eventually people to see, like private information. But use your internal documentation as a way. That's one way. If you have more time or luxury, of course you can go and read Nolo Press and learn about the tactics, learn about how to do a patent application. But that to me is a very complicated path. So I want to jump back into that first slide about our intro. Let me just run a quick couple of minutes showing you that the internals we use that we will make available to entrepreneurs to do this, and a way to cut costs. So if you hang on for a moment and let me show you our system. Let me share the screen. Okay, so so this is an example of our system that we worked on in the past year, and I'm just I'm just gonna start delete the things that we've done before for a previous demo. So here it is. So typically in this system, when you come in, give it a title, give it a paragraph of the background of your invention, i.e. the problem you're solving. And then you go down and you give it a paragraph about your invention. In this case, I hypothetically made a hamburger as my invention for demo purposes, right? Then what we do is we ask you to upload images. So, like I said earlier, an image is worth 1,000 words. So upload as many as you can. And then what you do is you go in there and you annotate your diagram with with a part list. So you say 100 is the top button and 110 is the bottom button. Then our system, what it'll do is it'll allow you to click on a button called auto text, and it's now generating the text based on its knowledge of the patent system, and also the knowledge it learned from Wikipedia, which is the starting point that the AI is trained on, is English, and then we train it on the patent language, and so it's generating text. You can see it here. And then once it's generated, if you don't like it, you can just refresh it. And otherwise, you just click on insert, and it will insert that text in for you so that you can start editing. So you can see here, so far, it's probably about a minute in generating a text for you. And it'll give you a starting point. It's not going to replace what's in your brain, but it'll start it'll give you a good starting point. And then once you've done that, then I'll show you next how it'll check for common errors that people unfamiliar with patents may make, and it'll give you the diagnosis. So okay, let's assume you like this. You click on the insert. Now you can start editing it, right? So that's probably hopefully about 2 minutes of time. Then what you do is you select boilerplate, and this is where you can begin to sound like a lawyer, because in different sections we have different little thing that kind of introduces a section. So for example, in the brief description of the drawing, you can see here's an example of that boilerplate. You don't like that, pick this, whatever. Then in the claim section, like I said, the claim is a part where we don't expect a non-lawyer to be able to do well, but you can still outline, what you think is important. And then and if you want a lawyer to review it, they can take that and they can buff it into a claim. They can massage it for you. Or if you've done this, 5 or 10 times, you will get the feel for how to do the claims. So the claim, I would say that's the one thing that a good lawyer, I think, is recommended. Then we run into the diagnostic, and here you'll try to catch inconsistencies. Like, for example, you have a top button and a button, and that's probably okay. You have lettuce and cheese. Yeah, there's no overlap there. Let's say, yeah, here's container, and well, here's going to be a problem. A processor 22 and a container 22. So that's a problem because inconsistency, right? So that's what you see here. It'll diagnose that. Then we're going to go into a section where you have to enter information that the patent, the form that the patent office requires. And then you can just simply review it. You can see the whole thing here. And then if you like it, you export it as a Word document. And let me see. Let's see. And so you can see here in about, I think, 10 minutes of demo, we've gotten a good baseline for you in a format that sounds very much like a lawyer's drafted this. Now you can go in and start plugging in your own, changes. So that's one approach to cut costs and yet, balance our ability to help you as a strategic advisor in the legal side of it, and the technology, which you are the king of. We didn't invent it. You invented it, so your invention best, and so you can document them. So this is so that's an example of the new technologies that's coming in. We are very proud of it, but I'm sure that there are other people that are trying to eventually working on this as well. But that's basically the new trend in AI technology. So
no, this is excellent, and thank you for going through the demo, because I think that's just very helpful. I think we have a whole bunch of questions though that are coming in. Is after the documentation is done, how do people submit their own provisional patent, especially if they're doing it without a lawyer due to costs? So when you have that document, I guess the question is, what's next?
Yes, fortunately, the patent office is modernized and they have an online filing portal, and you can go there and I can send you the link for direct filing. In fact, our system actually allows you to give you that link, and you can just directly jump to there as well.
Okay.
So yeah, you can certainly do it yourself, and it's not that hard. So yes, online filing is easy.
Yeah, and even if you start with, and here's my observation as, Boom Startup Accelerator, especially for companies that are preparing for like pre-seed rounds, provisional patents are a healthy start. And it's fine if you're filing it on your own as yourself, because people will ask, like, where is it in the submission process? So it's really important to just at least get that documentation done and submitted, especially before you speak to investors, or like what Bao said, before you start really making things publicly available. We have an individual that asked a very keen question here saying, can the engineers steal my idea if I don't have a patent, and would an NDA be enough to protect it? And so this is a wonderful question that actually goes into IP protection instead of patents. Bao, would you mind answering this question?
Yes, it's great. So you're now referencing what is called a trade secret. So that's a branch of IP. Yes, trade secret. An NDA is helpful, and often we recommend that even if you've gotten a patent, do an NDA, because it's a belt and suspender approach. Having said that, I think a provisional is so inexpensive. So put it this way: if somebody takes your idea and run off, the cost of litigation is going to run you, easily. The cheap end is going to be $20,000, $30,000. The high end can be hundreds of thousands of dollars. So for $1,000, for a few, maybe or a little bit over 1,000, just do the provisional and protect yourself, and have that in your pocket. Your investor is going to appreciate it. You can now talk to your suppliers, and you don't feel like you have to be so secretive. Because I think you can be open, have an open chest when you talk to investors, right? They're not going to like it when you say, well, I won't talk to you until you sign an NDA. And the investors are going to say, hey, I don't care, go and talk to somebody else. So you're
Well,
better
and if
off.
I can interject here, this question was about engineering. And from my perspective on the engineering, especially if you're outsourcing engineers or
Oh,
have them as
yeah.
contractors or full-time employees, they have to sign an agreement before they look at any code
Right.
that basically relinquishes their right of ownership for any contributions. And this is a very common agreement term, which should be in lock and step with your patent plan because of what Bao said, which is trade secrets. And when people are contributing to your code, they cannot claim ownership. And it also allows you to license it, etc. The other thing that I would also contribute to this is to do what we call code checks, because what would be horrible is if someone contributes code because they got it from GitHub, etc., and it's covered under someone else's patent or copyright agreement, which could also be a complete showstopper for not only your software, but also for your funding rounds. Bao, can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Oh, yeah. Of course, with your suppliers, your vendors, you should have a boilerplate NDA in the contract with your suppliers. Because if you don't, the work product actually could be theirs, and all you have is the license to use. So this occurs very frequently in copyright domain. So let's say, even with non-patent technology, let's say we hire somebody to do a website, they technically own the copyright. You have a license to use it, but you don't own it. So you need to have an express provision in your contract. And what Tara has also talked about reference is open source issues. So if somebody utilizes open source code into your system, you may be obligated to expose all your work to republish it back as an open source coding. And it can be a significant issue. Hopefully that answers the question, Tara.
Yeah, I think it does. Agreements must be basically checked, and you have to look at ownership for contributions before you do any sort of code sharing. We had an individual from Uganda. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us about how can trust be built with services and information protected from hackers. Here's the thing, patents are basically exploited and violated all the time. I think Bao answered this previously, but we can readdress it, which is you have to have the funding and the awareness of the patent violation and then pursue them legally to stop the claims. Bao, can you talk about after you have that patent, be it a provision or a utility or a design patent, and how you pursue people or entities that have violated the use?
Yes, sure. So patents are a creature of national law. So, U.S. patents only cover U.S. Territory. You can't use a U.S. patent and go over to, let's say, Europe, for example. So that's number one caveat. So it's going to be nation by nation. So typically what you do is you pick the most economically powerful countries to patent in. So Europe is a block, US, China is actually becoming a very good IP system. So you do that first. Then once you have the patent issue, then what you do is you can enforce the patents, and you can use different strategies to enforce this economically. We all hear it's multi-million dollars to do a patent litigation, right? But I think there are inexpensive options available to startups. For example, Amazon now has a dispute resolution system where if you have a patent for $500, you can then say, hey, that seller is selling this product, and they infringe my patent in this way, and you've raised that. Actually, I think it's more than $500. It's $2,000, I think, but small amount. Amazon will look at that and then block the seller. So that's certainly one way, an inexpensive way of you using it. You can also file them with the at the border, where they call it international, the import-export inspection, and so that's another inexpensive way to raise the heat. And in the end, litigation is, if you have a big business, then you got to look at litigation. But you can certainly use these administrative processes to do cost-effective enforcement of your patents, also trademarks. Don't forget about that.
Yeah, and if I can add on to this, Boom Startup has connections with the International Trade Administration in the United States. We also work with the U.S. Department of Commerce, and we do work on multinational aspects of distribution and protection as well. The U.S. PTO stands for Patent and Trade Office, and they actually have an app. Because one of our questions is that, is there a public database where we can find patents or patent types? The answer is yes. Start with the USPTO, that's where everything is filed, and it's there is a bit of a time process. Honestly, I've worked with it directly. Whenever you file an inquiry or application, it does take time. But it's actually a wonderful experience. You'll get assigned an agent that does have an attorney or a legal background, and can not make recommendations, but can make observations on what is going on. And so it's one of these sorts of things that, strategically speaking, if you look at like what's the core of your business and want to protect it, first off in the United States, and then where else your product is being distributed to, or where your clients are, it's absolutely worth working with the International Trade Administration and the U.S. Department of Commerce. Right.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So there are many avenues to enforce your rights in a cost-effective way. Once you've grown and you have a few tens of millions of dollars in revenue, then the cost issue becomes not less of an issue.
Are there other databases, public databases for utility patents that people can use?
Oh, sure. There are a number of them. We recommend the uspto.gov. They have a search engine. The UI of uspto.gov is not so modern. Google patents, so you would say patents.google.com has a pretty good UI. Now, I've heard of some inventors saying, well, but Google sees everything that we type. So they're fear of perhaps some confidential, some information that Google knows about you, but I'm less worried about that. There are also the European Patent Office has a good search engine tool. So if you're worried about that, Google seeing what you do, then go to uspto.gov or the epo.org, which is a European Patent Office. They have very good search engine. China has also very good search engine, but I assume most people don't, they don't search in Chinese, and so. But I think the government patent offices that would use that. They're good resources.
Thank you for answering the resources. And if there's any follow-up questions, please connect with Bao and help you out. We have a really good question that just came in, which is, can we still apply for a patent even if we go live with the product? And my understanding is yes, but Bao, can you talk about best practices and like when you should look at the patent?
Yes, so the US has a 1-year grace period. So that means 1 year from the first sales or the first commercialization effort, you got that clock, that grace. Now, the problem is worldwide, it's an absolute ban. So, so that means out in Europe or in China, you're not going to be able to get it if you've already been selling it. So you've lost that fraction of your right. But if you're a startup, most likely you're going to care about US first. So you're lucky to have that 1-year grace period. So ideally, before you make an offer of your product, do a provisional application or do a utility, and then you're protected. However, if you miss that window, you still got a 1-year time frame to protect that idea in the United States. And and then, of course, if you somehow miss that as well, the key then is to do your version 2 of the product and focus on that and use, and hopefully your version 2 has significant innovation in it. That's actually the commercially important thing. So don't give up hope. The point here is, it's keep fighting for it.
I was with many software startups prior to my acceleration part of my career, and we did not patent anything when we were in prototype or MVP. But what we were doing was actually tracking and collecting the developer documentation and the QA documentation, because the QA actually created the use cases, which became claims.
Absolutely.
And when we would basically harden it for GA, we'd launch the GA, and a couple months later is when we'd actually formalize the patents and do the provisional and then roll it into utility, because we definitely did stair step it. But we got our the lead QA person to have that patent perception when they were basically building out the test scripts. So you actually have really good resources internally. It doesn't necessarily have to be the head of engineering. It could also be the people that are testing it to see if it breaks or not as a resource.
Oh yeah, no, that person would know, what's changing, right? So let me add on to that a little bit. You might want to pull in the marketing person as well. Mm-hmm. And let me give you a little story. Early in my career, I worked with Compaq in its early heydays, and I did the patents on the Lunchable laptop, which is 20, 30 years ago. And so what they do, Compaq, the policy is, well, every single new year that you would have a new model. So I guess like a car, right? So then every new year we would get together with the product marketing team and start saying, well, okay, what's new about this release? And they'll say, oh, this release has certain features X, Y, and Z that we really prefer to, Dell not copying it or something like that. And so then we'll say, okay, well then let's tell me what you've done that's novel about these features. So I think that dovetails with your discussion about QA testing for each release, right? So combine the QA guy who knows the technology, what's being changed, combine with marketing who's saying what's significant to our customer about this, and you will get a very good, powerful tool to help you think about what's important. So let me give you an interesting bit of history that I saw. So when I was helping out the Invisalign retainer, now Invisalign had all these fancy 3D printing technology, because back in the year 2000, they accounted for, I think, a third of worldwide 3D printing production, because all day long they were printing dental models. So we have tons of patents on dental CAD technology, 3D printing technology, mechanism, how you convert that into dental solids, right? And so all those fancy patents we got. But the one thing that stuck in my mind was we had one patent on that, all it says was 3 or more retainers that are sequenced, with a sequence indicia. So it could be a number, it could be a color, it could be a character, right? And so that innocuous patent actually blocked a lot of the world's competition, because even if you solve all the 3D printing issues that Align solved early on, if you couldn't make a product that is properly used in a sequence to treat teeth, you would be at a major disadvantage. So, and in fact, somebody did try to do that. So somebody tried to do, they call it the red, white, and blue dental system, where the sequence is obviously red, white, and blue. And our initial concept was you number them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to the end of the treatment stage, right? Red, white, and blue got blocked because of that patent. And so sometimes having your business guys involved in the discussion and the strategic thinking of what you patent can be very powerful.
Yeah, we had a couple other questions coming in, drilling into this topic, in fact, about patents, and if you can patent a process. I understand if you reframe it as a technical invention, your process, that is in fact patentable, but you can't patent the process itself. Can you clarify a little bit on this?
That's not correct. We do process all the time. In fact, most of the software patents are in the form of a process.
Oh, but not a business process, excuse me.
Oh, yeah. Well, business method, see, the Patent Office has created a special group called the Business Method Group, and we call it the Death Squad. You go there, they're gonna blow you up. I think early in the heydays of the .com era, the business method were common. Like, for example, the Amazon one-click patent. Believe it or not, nobody managed to kill it, even though it's pretty broad. They couldn't find a piece of prior art that actually, predated a one-click ordering system. So anyway, there's a huge outcry, and as a result, the Patent Office then said, oh, well, okay, we're going to clamp down on this. So, I see this conflict with most startups. They say, well, we want to protect our business model. Why can't we do that? So the answer is that you can still get a business method, but you need to tie it a little bit into what is the technical innovation you have. So one way to get out of this is to say, well, okay, my business method is this, but I've done one thing where it accelerated the processing so much that it's not just the use of a conventional business method, combining that with a computer, because the Patent Office is going to say, well, a computer is generic. Your business method, if it's explained at a very high level, it could be done by any human. And so if you make that mistake, that's why I keep on going back to the disclosure being very important. You want details. You really want to have good details in there about, your, let's say, maybe how your data structure might be done so that it speeds up it's very efficient computationally. So you want to kind of discuss in the software space, things that accelerate and improve it over a conventional computer just executing conventional known steps, because that's where they're going to hammer you on. So, in the software space, think a little bit about what kind of performance edge did you do to make this system able to scale up and serve millions of people. I'm pretty sure you have to do some special trick. So it's there, but it's just in the way you couch them. And if you couch them incorrectly, you're going to get bounced out as a business method.
Okay, thank you. We have a couple more questions, which is, should someone get a single patent for all the unique parts of a project instead of having a separate patent for each? What would you recommend?
It's a function of cost benefit, right? If you have the fortune of being a Series A funded $5-10 million, the cost of a patent is a rounding error. So in that scenario, I would do lots of patent, because when you think of it, a patent, if you just file one, I can design around it. If you start filing two, it's getting tougher to design. If you have a mesh like this, now, even if I could design around it, it's going to take me probably 9 months to figure out how to design around it, and another 9 months to figure out to implement it. That alone gives you a speed advantage over your competition, right? Number one. Number two, they have a lot of uncertainty. This thing about, well, they have this web that we kind of think we've weaved through it, but we're not sure. And you have to tell the board, okay, we're entering this space that's kind of dangerous, right? So I would recommend a portfolio if you can. Think of it, if you're having a Navy, would you be comfortable with one super carrier that's $10 billion, or you would be more comfortable with 1,000 destroyers, each 100 million? I would go with 1,000 destroyer and put smart missiles on it rather than an aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
But if you don't have the budget, then do one and do as best as you can. So it's a scenario, right? So if you're a seed company, do at least one and provide as much detail into there, because that lays the foundation that could live in the next 20 years, that you can then continually create descendant patents from that. And so that's the way I would do it if I don't have budget, is build an aircraft carrier that eventually I'm going to split apart into smaller ships later downstream. But if I have a large budget, I would go the other way.
Yeah.
It doesn't take that much. I mean, when I was at Align as a public company, it has like 30 applications a year. It's
wow.
Well, for a public company, it's actually not that much of an expense.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, we're talking startups here, that are pre-revenue, and so just starting with one, making it that carrier approach, is a common path, if necessary, for cost savings. Right. We also have another really good question come in about communicating patents. The question is it a good idea to publicize provisional patents, or would you file and not disclose it on like website or marketing materials or in sales situations?
It depends on the strength of your write-up. When you file the provisional, you have that priority date, so you're safe already. I guess if the objective of your publishing your application early is to scare off the competition, then if you have a very well-written and in-depth disclosure, I think it's okay, because you're already protected. But the other side of me as a lawyer, kind of thinking in the back of my mind, what could I go wrong if I tell the world a little bit early? Could they possibly design around it earlier? Could it be that, could I make a mistake and I forget to convert my provisional within the 1 year period? And if I forgot to do that, then that means I can no longer claim that provisional date. And then if I publish it, now my own patent application can go back against me because it's a publicly available document. So the pro and cons, but in general, I would say my comfort level is tilting slightly against the publication of that. But you may have very good strategic reason to do so. So
next question is, where do filing patents get expensive or take up a lot of time?
Well, I guess from a process perspective, once you file it as a utility, well, a provisional is not examined. So once you file it, your patent pending, you're good to go for 1 year. Now, when you convert it into a utility, there is a big delay at the patent office, roughly around 2 years, or maybe 1.5 to 2 years before they actually pick it up. because you have other people in front of you. So you're going to run a delay there. And then depending on the interactions with the examiner, it may take you anywhere between, I would say, 6 months to another year, a year and a half before you can, get something out. So there is a time delay, uh, that's really driven by the patent office. Now, of course,
Yeah.
if you can shorten your time to prepare and file it using, you have a very good workflow on your end, and you shave maybe a month or two or 3 or 4 months on your end at filing, that may give you a slight advantage. But I think the big delay is at the 2-year delay at the patent office.
Now, and let's drill into this a little bit because of that sort of time delay. And when you file the applications, we just got a great question come in fact, saying, can you amend or add details during this period of it being reviewed? And I recall receiving feedback from the patent office that asked for clarification. But I don't know about changing the submission itself. Can you answer that question?
Sure. So there are 2 components to that. The original disclosure, i.e. your technical material, that cannot change.
You can't change that.
Right, because they give you a date, right? So that date is locked in stone. So this is your quote unquote priority date. So your priority date, let's say January 1, 2020, it shows, 10 pages of text description and 5 diagram, right? So if you want to rely on that date, you cannot later on saying, oh, well, I have another figure here that I just added on here. So technically the answer is you cannot change the technical description of your application. You can change the claim as long as that claim is supported by the text in your description. So that's why, again, we favor very in-depth discussion, detail in your application, because the more details you have in there, it just like in computer language, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. If you don't think very much about your application and you submit a 1-pager, then then you can't later on 9 months later say, oh no, wait a minute, I'm going to add another page to that. It's just not going to work. So, but having said that, company go through product iterations constantly. You always see, the 2020 iPhone 12, iPhone 13, iPhone 14. So things are always evolving. And so what companies always do is, okay, what's the difference between an iPhone 12 versus a 13? And we're going to patent that incremental difference. And so, this may boil back to your earlier question about the quantity and the price and the cost balance, right? So, but I would say, it's okay to add material. There's no harm in it. But when you file a case, do your best, push it in, and then push the button to launch, and then count on another year. If you have improvement, add it in. So make it a process, because that's what big companies do. I mean, Apple, I guarantee you, routinely files some additions to their innovation.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. We're coming to the top of the hour. These questions are fantastic from the audience. Cannot thank you enough for participating. Again, certainly follow up with Bao if you're interested in his patent application writing program or his advice as to when you should do something or how to cluster it, etc. He's a wonderful person, available all the time, and just so insanely knowledgeable and experienced. Bao, I cannot thank you enough for your time today. And we'd love to also invite you to attend our upcoming programs. On Thursday, I'm hosting a deep dive into an investor pitch deck, specifically driving into the innovation, value, and differentiation slide. Most people don't understand the importance of this slide and really don't nail it within the 90 seconds that they have to communicate the value to investors. So if you've done these slides before for customer facing, guess what? It's completely different than when you're presenting it to investor. We're also offering a Halloween pet costume contest. We do have prizes and giveaways. Please come, it'll be hilarious, and it's just fun. We actually do have fun here at Boom. And next week, we do have another OpenUp session on MVP development best practices. of course, everything that you heard from Bao today about patents, etc. This is really important. It's a precursor to what you're going to harden and sell and license. So we hope to see you there. And that too is another free program. So thank you so much, Bao, for being a part of the Boom Startup community. You're a lovely mentor and so knowledgeable. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you. I love it. I live and breathe patent, but I always love to see it when it's actually applied to help companies grow. So, thank you for the opportunity to present. I love it. And if you have any question, call me. I love talking to people.
Yes, awesome.
How do I get in touch with Bao? And also, do we have dates for the next patent writing workshop?
We don't offer patent writing workshops, and Bao's.
I can offer it if you want. I'm happy to do that.
Yeah.
Is there? How do we contact you, Bao?
Yeah, we have contact. I think Tara is going to send that link out. So
yeah, this recording is going to be made available basically by the end of today. You'll get an email that will contain the landing page link. All of the contact information, the slide presentation, as well as the recording will be available. So yes. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you and have a great day.
Okay, ciao.
Bye.